Welcome to Positive Perspectives, a podcast dedicated to sharing powerful stories that present opportunities to grow from lived experiences. Each week we speak to expert guests who bring thought-provoking topics, meaningful lessons or stories that spark transformation and deeper understanding. Today my guest is Kingsley Johnson, a coach, a mentor, a business consultant, and the founder of Kinetic People Development. Kingsley helps individuals and teams by transforming mindsets, developing leadership skills, and building high-performing cultures. Hi Kingsley, welcome to Positive Perspectives.
Hi, Marie. It's lovely to be here. Thank you.
Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and what you're going to be sharing today?
Yeah, so today I really am looking forward to our conversation. I'm planning to share some stories about my life that relate to both Black History Month and also personal development, the space that we both work in and both love.
So great. This is a story of the journeys that you've been on and some of those nuggets of experience and insight that you're going to share with us today.
Definitely. I think there's a lot of change happening quite rapidly, and sometimes the ability to kind of reflect or to go back to those pivotal moments in our lives that help to kind of build that purpose or shape that purpose. It can kind of be like a bit of a foundation setter. So yeah, I'm hoping to really share some wonderful ideas and stories.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So I know there was something around value. There was a sort of a title around this. What was the kind of title that you came up with for this?
So for me, it was the value of knowing your history to stand in your power and pride. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be lovely to hear your stories.
Excellent. Okay. So when I was thinking about our conversation, it made me reflect on a pivotal moment. And sometimes in our lives, we have those moments where something shifts, and it's almost as if you're transported back to that time. You can see the faces, you can see the environment, you can smell, you can take. It's like you're physically, you've time traveled.
Yeah.
And so for this particular story, it relates to me when I was about maybe 13 or 14 and grew up in northwest London. I'm going to show my age here. So it was in the sort of maybe mid 80s, sort of mid to late 80s. And growing up in London at that time, there was so much sort of social upheaval. There was so many challenges. There was loads and loads of opportunities. But as a young black boy in that time, it was for me quite challenging. And at that time, there was lots of distractions. I was kind of going off the rails a little bit. I wouldn't say I was a bad boy, but I kind of ran with that crowd, and my life could have really gone a completely different route. And I remember to this day, and even as I'm going to retell this story, I can feel myself sort of going back to that time. There was one teacher called Mr. Livesey. So Chris Livesey. He's unfortunately no longer with us, but I will always cherish the conversation that we had because at the time he was a fantastic history teacher, and we were talking about I believe like the civil rights, and he was trying to get us as a classroom engaged. And I kind of I always loved history, loved the storytelling, loved the lessons from the past. And in this particular conversation, I think the class was just sort of packing up to go away to leave. And he sort of turned to me, and I kind of said, yeah, this stuff is great, but it doesn't really appeal to me, or it doesn't really connect with me. And the words that he said to me were, Kingsley, it's so important to understand your history. And at the time, I kind of brushed it off, and I didn't really kind of understand what it meant. But as I kind of grew older, and I kept going back to that phrase, and any time I looked at the history of, say, the civil rights in America, or times in Britain, or times in Australia, where there has been a real sort of shift in sort of some of that racial aggression and environment, but also the real importance of recognizing what we as individuals can bring, but that also being based on our history, the ancestors, the people that have come before us. So even for us, and my family, thinking about my grandparents and the fact that they came over on the Windrush and they were part of the fabric of Britain. So my grandfather worked on the London Underground for many, many years. My grandmother was a nurse in the NHS. And so, again, when I look at all of the opportunities that I've had, it's based on the hard work, the discipline, the sacrifice, the things they had to face. And so now in the UK, where there's a lot more racially charged conversations, it really makes me reflect on the importance of us recognizing where we've come from, the impact we've had, and the potential for the future. And again, I guess that really shapes my pride and my desire to help everybody that I interact with, whether that's a client, whether that's somebody, a young person I'm mentoring, whether that's a fellow coach, to find that essence of who you are and to use that as the fuel to be able to go out into the world and make that difference, you know?
Yeah. So you said a lot around the history. Absolutely amazing that your history teacher could see that and understood the importance of having some foundation, some history, some roots, if you like, and made a point of talking to you about that, because that obviously has been the source of this conversation and the source of you discovering other roots as you're growing up and finding spaces where you feel that there is power and there is also pride in that strength, in that almost. But you mentioned connection as well, and I can see there's a connection around your personal history. But how does that sort of relate to your identity in such a fast moving world that we have today?
I guess when I think about identity, I guess the way that I see it is I see it as something that evolves. So when I was that young boy in secondary school, I didn't really know my place in the world. I knew that I had power, I came from good stock, and I was proud of my family. But then you go into an environment, say at university, and you're one of the only black faces or brown faces in that environment. And again, there was maybe a bit of a challenge around, okay, I want to fit in. I know that I'm different, but at the same time, I want to be accepted. I want to succeed. I want to progress. And I would say, even now, when I look at my family, my partner is Spanish, and we have our son, Sergio, who's almost a year old. And it's important for me to have that clear foundation in terms of my roots. But then I'm also aware that my family now spreads into other parts of the world. There's Chinese in my family, so Indian sort of heritage. There's African, there's Caribbean, there's English, there's Swedish. And so again, my identity or the way that I view myself is somebody who's part of a global citizen. I'm made up of all of these wonderful influences, and they've all added to my identity. Yeah. So when I was younger, it was very much around understanding why somebody may have an issue with somebody who looks like me or sounds like me, and then having that real enlightenment and that real respect for some of the sort of sacrifice, challenges, hardships that people have gone through. And right now, it's that reflection of all of the elements in my family, all of the wonderful mentors and leaders that I've worked with, all of the team members that I've had. So all of those experiences, all of those conversations, all of those loves, those conflicts, to me, all of them have to form and are part of my identity now, you know? And so then I think that then shapes my aims and ideals around helping leaders to increase that self-awareness, to lead with more empathy, to look at how they can create environments for others to thrive as well. And it's about losing some of that ego. And I
Mm.
guess part of that sort of worldview is shaped by what I would define as my identity.
Yeah. Well, that's you use the word global, so there's a term global majority as well, but you use that term global, and I felt a sense of richness when you were talking about your roots, if you like, and how wide and far your roots are, and how that is the making up of who you are. And from that place, you have got a vision, or you have got an idea of how maybe it's about acceptance, maybe it's about helping, supporting other people to become aware of the global majority and how we're all made up of lots of different components that work together to make who we are. And that is to be celebrated.
Absolutely, because I think especially in terms of the use of technology, social media, 24-hour news cycles, it's very simplistic to view things in the binary. And that idea that you don't know somebody, you don't know their history, you don't know their family makeup, you don't know what challenges they've overcome to get to where they are, but you can make an assumption about them or you can interpret their behavior in a particular way. And to me, I think there's so much more when it comes to leadership, but also the individual responsibility to develop yourself. When I work with amazing young professionals who are ambitious and they their confidence may not necessarily be where it needs to be, that sort of grounding, that authentic realization about their identity, that recognition from a leadership point of view of there isn't a perfect way to be a leader. It's about embracing who you are, but then also recognizing the people that are around you, the impact you're having, and the environment you're creating, and being more consciously aware of that rather than that idea of I'm just going to do things because that's my personality. Whereas I strongly believe if we have the desire, if we have the support, if we have the sort of inspiration to, there's no reason you can't develop a multifaceted way of operating. I think it's really, really important to embrace that as maybe as early as possible in your career.
Yeah. So I'm hearing authenticity here, I'm hearing building relationships, and it's about we are human beings and we connect because we're human beings on that level. And the richness of that is that we are not two-dimensional. We are not even three-dimensional. We're just so many dimensions. But that makes the situation more of an interesting situation, more of a situation where you can be flexible and adapt, and work with others, collaborate and understand the same thing of others. So they're not two-dimensional. You can't treat them this way, that way, or the other way. You just have to be in the moment and be present and work together to actually develop what you need to develop.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the if you think back to any pivotal moment in your life, it's probably been in relation to you being present in the moment, you being showing possibly vulnerability or at least being open to a new perspective and trusting the other person's intention. And again, when I think about leadership and I think about stepping into your power and I think about walking with pride, you have to have that as core foundational elements because only by us having a genuine connection and being able to speak our truths and be respectful can we face a challenge together and find a solution or at least come out the other side. And I think that there's times when that can happen quite naturally. There are times when we have to consciously put in strategies, use practices or exercises, but there's also times where that completely breaks down. And I think when Think of some of the projects I've worked in where there's been quite dramatic changes in an organization. Where it's kind of fallen down or it hasn't been successful is where there hasn't been that openness, there hasn't been that connection. It's almost as if this is happening and this is happening to you and you will be okay. Whereas we both know if I feel like I'm part of the change, if my voice is heard, I'm going to be more receptive, I'm going to be more adaptable, I'm going to be more excited rather than putting up barriers and obstacles. And again, I think that ability to be able to see that, to be aware of it, to lean into it, it can be a superpower in certain situations.
Yes. Yeah. So you mentioned about these experiences that you're discussing today, that these experiences formed the foundation of some of the work that you do today. So it'd be great for you to expand a bit more on that for us.
Excellent. Okay, so I think one of the skills or one of the abilities that I've had since I was very young was the ability to listen, but to also challenge. And so if I think back to Chris Libsey and his comment about knowing your history, that challenged me to understand what he meant, to look into different aspects of Black history, of European history, of African history, Caribbean history, of American history, and to look for the patterns, to look for the examples of the great leaders, and to look for where things have been revolutionized. And then being able to actually think about, okay, how can I apply some of these lessons, some of these abilities, some of these skills to help me in my career, but then also to look at how can I help to develop others. So becoming a coach has enabled me to create spaces for individuals, for teams, to work out where some of the commonalities are, the differences and the challenges are, and then collectively look at how do we get through this? How do we create our new reality? And again, I really find some of the work around mentoring and being able to listen to an individual, understand their goals, their dreams, and to provide insights from some of the mistakes or many mistakes that I've made, some of the wonderful successes, but then also some of the things that clients, friends, colleagues, family members have tried to provide ideas so that you're creating an environment where the person you're connecting with has ownership, but they also have somebody that's keeping them accountable. And again, when I think about Chris Libsey, or I think about any teacher, the idea is they want to inspire you. They want you to think bigger. They want you to learn and understand and question, but they're also going to be there to hold you accountable. They're going to test you. They're going to get you up in front of class to do a presentation. And again, it's interesting because a lot of it comes back to confidence and that idea that if I know who I am, if I'm doing something that I love, that inspires me, that gives me that power, then I'm going to be the best version of me. And again, it's pride and it's not arrogance, because we understand the impact that we have. We desire to do more of it, but it's not for personal gain. It's to improve an organization, it's to improve a team, it's to improve our community, and that is, I think, how I kind of connect it all back together.
Yeah. So confidence is a big issue in terms of the confidence you have when you understand your history, the confidence you have when you are challenged, but you've done some sort of exploration around what that challenge might be. But how do you think individuals can explore and reclaim their own history to build confidence and to build purpose?
I think when I think about confidence, I always get this sort of visual image of being in a car and looking at the rear view mirror, because confidence comes from what you've done. So again, when we look at understanding your history, you can only understand your history through, okay, reading You can, majority of it will be through conversation, through the stories from people that have walked the path that you're planning to walk, or people that care about you and they want to provide you with that fuel to go forward. So again, I think that there's something about looking for the positivity, looking for the ideas or inspiration to give you that even tiny bit of courage to take that step, to do that thing, to practice, to prepare. Because again, it it sometimes it's quite challenging because I've had conversations where people perceive that confidence is something that you will get or you will wait and to do something until you get confident, where it's actually the reverse. It's when you do the thing that you get the confidence. And so again, in the work that I do, it's very much around if there is a big scary goal or big hairy goal, as we like to call them, okay, how do we chunk it down? What are the first three steps that we could take to help you to start to move towards that? And it's the progress that also helps to give you the confidence, because it's that classic, the first time you do something, it's very scary. The fifth or sixth time you do it, it's probably not as bad. By the 10th time, it becomes almost natural,
Yeah.
you know?
The whole confidence piece is really a big thing, and thank you so much for those steps that people can actually take. But if someone was feeling sort of disconnected from their roots and unsure of where they belong, what sort of advice could you give them?
So I think the first step is to explore areas that give you a sense of pride. Yeah. So, for example, if somebody's feeling really disconnected, and there is something that they've done, whether it was a project, whether it was a piece of work, whether it was something in their church, something that they have contributed to that gave them that feeling of, that warm feeling of achievement. And then to actually think about or deconstruct, okay, what is it? What was it about that thing? What was the element that I truly enjoyed? Was it the preparation? Was it the presentation? Was it the reflection afterwards? And then looking at how we can um, identify maybe individuals who have done similar things and looking at how they prepared, presented, reflected, because we're looking at ways or strategies to add to what we do to help us to lift us up, as opposed to thinking maybe we're the only ones, we're going through this alone, and it becoming a bit of a vicious cycle. Whereas being able to show that vulnerability, to maybe ask for support and assistance, to do the research, to be inspired to try something new, I think that would be the way that would support somebody who was finding their current confidence levels not where they wanted them to be.
So, returning to the confidence piece, because what you've just said, there again, we're coming up with connection, coming up with confidence, we're coming up with the roots and the foundation of who you are, and self-awareness, bringing that into the room as well. So in terms of confidence, those roots, understand who you are, it's a lot to kind of take on board. And you started to say there are some steps that you can take. Firstly, small steps. Look at those things that have made you feel confident before, maybe. Look at those things, or people around you that you connect with that can make you feel confident. I also got a sense of when you were talking about that, sometimes you just have to jump off the edge of the cliff.
Yeah, absolutely right. Without making those leaps, you will never really know. Without having that conversation, without voicing your opinion, it will always be something that's kind of imagined. And it makes me think of a wonderful young professional who I'm mentoring at the moment. And I'll just share this very quickly. He was having some real issues around interviews. He was going for some really, really high level interviews and he was having some real sort of issues around them. And we were having a conversation and he started to share some of the work that he'd done outside of the professional kind of sphere. So it was more social change and charity work and um, positively impacting his community. And when he was talking about it, you could see his whole demeanor, his whole body shifted. And I just asked him, have you ever discussed that or ever raised that passion in any of your interviews? And he said at the time, no, I'd never really thought anybody would be interested. And it was like that was part of his essence. That was part of his identity. And I'm really, really pleased to say he did share some of those stories and he got offered a really, really fantastic role. Sometimes you have to bite the bullet, but it should all I think it should always be in a measured or a planned sort of method, as in, am I going into it expecting to learn rather than I don't really know, I'm just going to make the leap. Whereas I'm going to consciously make this step and it's going to be a strategic step because I'm looking at what the outcomes can be and then what that can tell me about how I approached it, how I prepared. Could I have dealt with it? Could I have got some support? What are the things that I can tweak and improve? As opposed to what I said earlier, it's not binary. It's not just because you did it and it didn't work out that you failed, or it's because you did it and it worked out and you won. It's more about what was the process? How can I improve it? People talk about marginal gains, so that extra 1%. And again, I think that's really that mindset can also be really, really useful in terms of looking at our confidence levels. So, am I going into a situation that is a bit nerve-wracking, a bit scary, but am I going into it thinking I'm going to learn a bit more about myself? I'm going to try something and I'm going to reflect on it and then tweak it. So, again, that growth mindset, maybe that learning mindset can be really, really powerful when it comes to confidence as well.
Thank you for that, Kingsley. That was amazing in terms of the feedback that you gave about that young person. I felt a sense of every step is about growth. Every step is about learning and changing or developing a mindset and an inner dialogue as well around that. Because as you mentioned, what your self-belief, what do you say to yourself and why do you say things to yourself? Sometimes we say things to ourselves that we wouldn't even say to our worst enemy.
Yeah.
So why do we do that? And really self-aware, recognizing that, and then changing that dialogue into an I can dialogue, or I'm growing through this. And every hurdle is a hurdle of growth and learning rather than a hurdle to fall down on.
Yeah, because I'm sure I read a quote recently where it was along the lines of, why do we call them obstacles? Because we can get over them. And so, or hurdles as well. And so it was what you were saying about self-talk is so vital. And it reminds me of one of the athletes that I've worked with. And she used to she had quite a negative way of, or that negative internal dialogue, yeah. And one of the things she wanted to do was to try to overcome it. And there were two things she did. The first was she put a rubber band around her wrist, and every time she said something negative internally, she would flick the rubber band. And over the course of a day, she completely surprised herself by the amount of negative things that she said. So building that conscious awareness was a thing that helped to start to manage that. And then the other thing she did, which I absolutely love, was she gave that inner voice a name. I think it was it Moaning Brenda? And again, what that did is it kind of separated that negative voice. It sort of gave it a bit of a personal form almost, so that she could almost say to herself, "Oh, not now, Brenda. I'm not in the mood for your negativity." And again, it's just those tiny little hacks, those things that help to build the awareness or bring us back into the present, which can help to rewire some of those internal mechanisms. Because again, I had a really wonderful conversation recently, and I hope you won't mind me sharing this, but he mentioned sometimes when his negativity kind of flares up, he can actually attribute it to a person. And in this situation, it was his mum.
Mm.
I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but again, some of us may really connect with the idea that our parents are so pivotal to our perspectives about ourselves. And some parents may, just because of their situation or circumstance, may have a naturally pessimistic or a more negative approach. And that you can't help but take some of that on board,
Mm.
you know? So as parents, as leaders, as mentors, as coaches, our language and the impact we have on others is so important. It's something, if you're not striving to improve your self-awareness, it's something that can become an issue for the people in our care.
I wish we had a lot more time to have these conversations because all the stories are coming out now. But when you were saying that, I remember a story about somebody I was coaching, and they said in terms of their parents, this is how formidable their parents' experiences has impacted on their lives. That when there was something amazing went on, to celebrate, and because they were uncomfortable, their parents were uncomfortable where they were going. It was a area in their lives that they had never trod before. So it was almost, they couldn't fathom that their child could be doing this. And they said, "You're getting too big for your boots," to
Wow.
them. And they were very hurt by that. But when they spoke to another friend, they said, "Well, maybe you should tell your parents that you need bigger boots."
Yeah,
So
absolutely love that.
changing the mindset, changing the dialogue really can support you just to move forward and jump those hurdles and not put up, when they come up, it's not about how you fall, it's about how quickly you get up and
Yeah,
the journey that you take to get up.
definitely. And I think there's something really wonderful about the empathy piece, because when we think about our parents, they they operated in a different time. They had very, very different challenges to us. So their worldview is going to be different. And again, sometimes there's an element of accepting that's how they see the world,
Yeah.
but that's not necessarily how I'm going to operate. I'm still going to be respectful. I'm still going to love you. But at the same time, I also understand that you just want me to be safe.
Yeah.
And sometimes expanding my comfort zone, taking those leaps, doing something that you think is a bit crazy. But if I'm doing it in a strategic way and I'm looking at that learning, that growth, that development, then whatever the outcome, I'm gonna use it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Sadly, we've come to the end of our time, but I've got just a couple more questions for you. One is, what positive takeaway do you have for our audience today?
I would say based on our conversation today and just that whole sort of conversation about identity and growth, I think every day we get to honor the people that came before us. In science, I think they referred to it as standing on the shoulders of giants. So when we think about our families, we think about our ancestors, we think about the leaders, the people that have helped us. And we also get to provide a pathway for those who are going to come after. So whether that's the next generation, whether that's our children, whether that's young professionals that we're helping to mentor or coach, there is something about really, really embracing the idea of honoring, but also being able to generate that pathway.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Kingsley, for joining me today and sharing your personal journey where you discovered how to reclaim or how reclaiming your history can build confidence and purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. It's been fantastic.